If you want to get your Bibles open to the book of Job, chapter 33. We're in Job chapter 33. And what? No, not yet. They're going to do it Tuesday. Tuesday, Edison's going to come by and do all the light fixtures in the church. It was postponed 1 week. But Job chapter 33, and we're gonna continue to march our way through. We're getting really close to the end of the book of Job, but we're in the part of the Job where things are starting to change a little bit here. And after we have a word of prayer, I'll get into the review of the lesson and bring everybody up to speed and to find out where. Oh, by the way, I had a great men's conference yesterday at Newport Beach, Friday night and Saturday. We had maybe 30 or 40 men of our church went down to Newport Beach and to have a special Southern California men's conference. They're going to do it again next year, November 11th and 12th, and it was a good time. And those of you who weren't able to go this year, I'd like to encourage you to come with us next year and be a part of that thing. Let's have a word of prayer, and I'll bring everybody up to speed where we are in the book of Job, and we'll continue on in our study of this really an amazing book of the Bible, the book of Job. Let's have a word of prayer. Father, we do thank you for this day. Lord, thank you for another opportunity, another day of life you've given us, that we can wake up and be healthy enough to get out and go about. Lord, there's many people in nursing homes who would love to get out of bed today and and go out somewhere, anywhere. But Lord, you've given us the health to be here, and we thank you for that. And as we look upon this Thanksgiving time coming around the corner, Lord, help us also to remember the many, many blessings that you give us on a daily basis. Now, Lord, help us today as we study your book. Help us as we look in the book of Job. Lord, teach us something that would help us along life's way. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, just briefly to bring everybody, by the way, Brother Bill's passing out those prayer request forms. If you have a special prayer request that you'd like Pastor Wilkerson to pray about, just fill out that form. You don't have to put your name on it. You could leave it anonymous if you want. But if you have a special burden and a special prayer request, just fill one of those out and we'll collect those at the end of the hour as we continue on in our book. Okay, the book of Job. Remember, we started out the book of Job in the very beginning. Satan and God were having a conversation one day. And God said to Satan, he said, "Hey, have you considered my servant Job? He's an upright man. He loves God. He stays away from evil, or he eschews evil." And Satan said to God, he said, "Yeah, well, the only reason Job loves you is because you take care of him. You bless him. Look what he's got. He's got camel, he's got oxen, he's got sheep, he's got 10 children. And the way that a person's wealth was measured in those Bible days was by the number of children you had and how much land you have and how much cattle you have. So God says to Satan, he says, "Yeah, Job, he's a good guy. He loves me." And Satan says, "Yeah, you know what? That's because you and him got a deal cooked. You bless him. He's got all this kind of stuff. No wonder he loves you. The only reason he loves you is because you take care of him, and he's got all these wonderful things." And God, and so Satan said to God, he said, "You take away those things from him, and he'll curse you to your face." And God said to Satan, he says, "Okay." He says, "Go ahead." He says, "I'll let you do that." And so Satan comes down, and all of Job's cattle are killed, and his 10 children die in their eldest brother's house. They were all meeting in his eldest brother's house, and the wind comes through, knocks the house down. All 10 of his children are gone. So now here's Job. All of his cattle's gone, all his camels gone, his 10 children are dead, and yet he does not curse God. And so God said to Satan, the second conversation, he says, "Hey, now what do you think of my servant Job?" He said, he passed the test. And Satan said, "Yeah, you know what though? Skin for skin, all a man hath he would give for his own life." He says, "Let me touch his body. Let me touch him personally, and he will curse you to your face." And God tells Satan, he says, "Okay." He said, "Go ahead, but don't kill him." He said, "You can do whatever you want to him, but don't kill him." Now here, as we said in the book of Job, we learn that nothing happens to us. Satan cannot do anything to us except God gives him permission. Nothing comes across our lives but what God is in charge of it. Everything that happens to us, God is aware of what's going on, and he has to approve it. And so Satan comes down to Job, and now he's lost his children, lost his camel. He still maintained his integrity, but now the second test comes through, and God allows Satan to touch Job, and he had running sores from the top of his head all the way down to the bottom of his feet, all over his body. And he was so miserable, he went to sit in the ash heap at the edge of the city in order to get some relief for his pain. And he was sitting in the ash heap, and he broke a piece of pottery, and he was scraping the sores off of his body. And still, he does not curse God, and he still maintains his integrity. The book of Job was written, and I've said this each week as we studied this lesson, the purpose for the book of Job and the reason why Job went through all this testing and all this trial was God wanted to show to Satan and to the world that a person will love God no matter what happens in their lives. And God trusted that Job would be strong enough to do this. You know, God doesn't put you through any trials in your life in order to crush you. God does not bring troubles into our lives in order to see how much we can take it before we finally break. No, God knows our limitations. So God brings difficulties and trials in our lives to strengthen us. So the book of Job, here Job passed the first test. He lost all of his possessions. He lost his 10 children. He maintained his integrity. Now he comes to test number 2. He has a personal infliction on his body, these sores all over his body. So he's sitting at the edge of the ash heap, and his 3 friends come by to cheer him up. Well, that was what they intended to do, but they didn't do a very good job of that. So his 3 friends came by to talk to Job. His first friend, whose name was Eliphaz, came to Job, and instead of encouraging Job and trying to help this poor guy out, he's already gone. Now Job, God never told Job why all this was happening to him. You and I know what's going on because we're reading the story as God has recorded it for us in the Bible. But Job did not know that he was being put through the test. All he knows is he's had these very bad things happen to him, and he's scratching his head trying to figure out, why is all these things happening to me? So his first friend comes by, and he says to Job, he says, you know what the problem, Job? You have done something really bad in your life, and that's why God's punishing you this way. Well, we know that that's not true. We know that God allowed these things to happen to Job because he was putting Job to the test. And he wanted to show Satan in the world how that person would love God no matter what happened to them. But his first friend had it all wrong. And once again, I'll say this, be careful how we judge people and what's going on in their lives. Just because somebody's having something bad happen to their lives, that doesn't mean that God is punishing them for something that they did. Okay? So his first friend said, Job, the reason you're going through all this is because you've done something bad, and God is going to punish you for that. Well, then his second friend comes along and says, you know what, Job? I think I figured it out. He says, because of the justice of God, you're going through all this trouble. God always rewards righteous people and people who love him and people who are trying to live a right life. And God always punishes the evil people who do wrong and don't give anything about God and don't love God. And so therefore, Job, you must be one of those wicked people because of the justice of God, you are being punished because you're evil and wicked. Well, we all know that's not true. There's some wicked people in this earth who don't love God, who don't go to church, who don't support foreign mission fields, who never speak a word of kindness to anybody, who don't give out the gospel, and they have beautiful homes, they have wonderful cars, they have large fat salaries. There are people on this earth who what we would consider to be wicked people who have it, we would call made in the shade. And there are people who live on this earth who love God, who are faithful to God. And they have a tough time financially. They have a tough time physically. So we know Job's second friend, he had it all wrong. He says he had his view of God was that God blesses all the people who live right and God punishes all the people who live wickedly. And so therefore, Job, since you've been punished, you must have done something wicked in your life. Well, so much for that theory. I mean, that poor guy, he doesn't understand real life. Then Job's third friend comes along, and I call them, these are friends in quotes, like one fellow said, with friends like this, who needs enemies? His third friend comes along and says, Job, he says, the reason you're going through all these troubles and the reason you're going through these difficulties in your life, he says, you're a liar and a hypocrite. You say that you have examined your life and you cannot find anything in your life that you have done why you would consider that God would punish you this way. But yet, look what's happened to you. Therefore, you're a hypocrite. You say one thing, but your life says another. So Job, just fess up. You messed up. You've done something wrong, and God is punishing you because you're doing something wrong. And then from about chapter 17 to about chapter 31, We skip those chapters in our Bible study here only because it would be repetitious. In chapter 16 through 31, we have conversations back and forth between Job and his three friends. His three friends gave their theory, and Job answers them. And then the three friends come back and give their theory, but they say the same old thing, and then Job answers. But basically, Job is saying, look, I have examined my life. I have thought, he said, I know what's right and I know what's wrong. He's talking to his three friends. He said, if I've examined my life, and if I thought there was something in my life that I did that would cause God to be punished, I wouldn't be so bewildered about all this. I would know that I did something wrong. But I've studied my life, I've looked at my life, and I cannot find anything that I have done. Now, I'm not perfect. Job never admitted that he was sinless, okay? But he said, I cannot see anything in my life that I have done which would cause God to bring such punishment upon me. And so finally, these three friends are back and forth with Job through chapter 16 through chapter 31. Then last week we talked about chapter 32. Now a young man pops up on the scene. Someone who we didn't know up until chapter 32 was actually there. He's been there the whole time. This young man who has been there, and he's listened to these guys talk to Job, and he's listened to how Job answers them, and now he wants to say something. His name is Elihu. And look at chapter 32, verse 7. This young man said, I said, days should speak, and multitude of years should teach wisdom. He said, you know what? I've kept my mouth shut all this time because you guys are older than me. Talking about days should speak, meaning older people who have lived longer, more days upon this earth should be the ones talking. Therefore, I sat back and let you listen. Then look at verse 9. He said, but great men are not always wise, neither do the aged understand judgment. This young man says, I have been here listening to you three guys talk to Job. I've heard you give him your opinions as to what's wrong. He says, and I think you guys are all wrong. He said, now, I'm a young fellow, and I respect you guys that you're older than me. So that's why I haven't said anything. But he says, now I've got to say something. He said, this thing is welling up in me. Look down in verse 18. He says, for I am full of the matter. The spirit within me constraineth me. Behold, my belly is as wine which hath no vent, and is ready to burst like new bottles. He says, I'm about ready to blow up inside. He says, I want to say something here, fellas. Brother Matt, could you turn the fans off, by the way? It feels like it's getting a little too chilly in here. And to turn it on before church time starts. Thank you. He says, this young man, he says, I've got this thing welling up in me. He says, I think I understand what's going on here. And he said, and I want to say something. Now, with respect to you older guys, I give you respect. I haven't said anything up to this point, but now it's my turn. He said, I really want to say something. And so now we pick up the story in chapter 33 in the book of Job. And let's read verses 1 through 7, and then we'll talk for a few minutes about these verses. Wherefore, now here's this young man. He's about ready to tell Job and his three friends what he thinks is going on here in the life of Job. Wherefore, Job, I pray thee, hear my speeches, hearken to all my words. Behold, now I have opened my mouth, my tongue hath spoken in my mouth. My words shall be of the uprightness of my heart, and my lips shall utter knowledge clearly. The Spirit of God hath made me, and the breath of the Almighty hath given me life. If thou canst answer me, set thy words in order before me, and stand up. Behold, I am according to thy wish in God's stead. I also am formed out of the clay. Behold, my terror shall not make thee afraid, neither shall my hand be heavy upon me. So here, this young man says to Job, he said, I'd like to say a few things. He says, the Spirit of God within me has shown me these things. God has shown me what I'm about to tell you. And then he's very respectful. He says in verse 4, he says, the Spirit of God hath made me, the breath of the Almighty hath given me life. He says, I'm just like you guys, you know. He said, I'm not anybody special. God created me just like he created you. I'm not anybody different. And then he says in verse 5, if thou can answer me, set thy words in order before me, stand up. He said, Job, and while I'm talking to you, if there's anything you want to say, just go ahead and butt in, interrupt. That's no problem. He said, you know, you could see this young man has got a lot of humility. He's about ready to give his opinion, what he believes that God laid upon his heart to answer this problem that Job is facing about why he's going through all this difficulty. But you notice he's treading into this very, very carefully. He doesn't want to come in there like, well, I know everything. Teenagers like to think that they know everything. I like what one fellow said one time. He said, teenagers think they have all the answers to life's questions. The only problem is nobody's asking them the questions. And that's true. Sometimes young people think they're smarter than old people. Sometimes young people have that cocky attitude to where, mom and dad are dumb. They don't know anything. And I don't know why they do the way they do. And I know how life is supposed to be. Yeah, right. They're still wet behind the ears and they got life all figured out. But this guy was not that way. He was very careful. He was very cautious. And when he wanted to come and give his opinion, he didn't want these guys to, sometimes when people come into you like that, you just turn them off. You say, you know what, you don't even know what you're talking about. I'm not going to even listen to you. And this young man didn't want that to happen because he believed that God had given him the answer to this matter. So he comes very respectfully to these older men. He comes very cautiously, and he's talking to Job, and he's telling them, look at verse 6. He says, behold, I am according to thy wish in God's stead. Remember Job, and those of you who have been with us in this study, in the beginning part, Job kept saying he wanted to have his day in court. He wished that God would come down from heaven and have a day, and Job wanted to be able to explain his side of the story. And then he wanted God to explain why he was going through this. And there's one time when Job said, oh, I wish there was a daysman, one who could come between me and God and who could bring my case to God. So Job kept wishing all along that during this time of mental frustration, why am I going through this? Why are my 10 children dead? Why are all my cattle gone? Why do I have these running sores all over my body? God, please give me an answer and bring somebody by who can be a go-between between us. And so I can understand all this. So now this young man says, hey, Job, you know what? He says, I am according to thy wish in God's stead. He said, I think I've got the answer to your problem. You've always asked for God to send somebody along the way who could sort of mediate between us. He says, and I am here. But then look, once again, here's this respect that this young man has. He says, behold, verse 6, behold, I am according to thy wish in God's stead, but I am also formed out of the clay. He said, but I'm just a man just like you, Job. I'm nobody special, but I do think I have the answer for you, and I believe that I can do for you what you've been wanting all along, somebody to come and open your eyes and help you to understand what's going on in your life. And then in verse 7, he said, behold, my terror shall not make thee afraid, neither shall my hand be heavy upon thee. Poor Job. Going through all these difficulties, and these 3 friends, if you want to call them friends, have come by, and they have been very heavy-handed upon him. They've given this, they said, well, Job, you're a liar. Job, you must have done something wrong. That's why God's punishing you. Job, God punishes the wicked people, and God honors the good people, and therefore you must be a wicked person. So his 3 friends have been kind of harsh on him. But this young man says, I'm not going to be that way, Job. He wanted Job to really pay attention to him. And he wanted Job to listen to him. And he wanted to make sure that Job didn't understand, here comes another guy. Job, I think it was in chapter 16 or chapter 15, Job says, miserable comforters are ye to me, talking about his 3 friends. If you and I had swapped places, Job said, and you were having a trouble, I'd come by and try to encourage you. But that's what friends are for. But Job told his 3 friends, he says, miserable comforters are you. All you do is come by and give me your theories and make the things worse. Well, this young man wanted Job to know that he's different. He's not. That's what he said in verse 7. Behold, my terror shall not make thee afraid. He said, Job, I'm not here to beat you up over this. Sometimes when you're going through a difficulty and some people come by, it's like they take a baseball bat and beat you over the head like you need more problems in your life, And this fellow says, look, I'm not going to be that way. I'm not going to be a terror to you, Job. I want to help you. I want to give you the message. And neither shall my hand be heavy upon thee. I'm not going to be critical of you, Job. I'm not going to be heavy-handed with you. I'm not going to, try to put you down and make you feel worse than what you already feel. Look, Job didn't need anybody to come by and make him feel bad. He was already feeling bad as it was. He needed somebody to come by and encourage him. He needed somebody to come by and say, look, Job, I think I have the answers to why you're going through this difficulty. Well, now we have this person. After 31 chapters of the book of Job, of his friends going back and forth saying, Job, you've done something wrong. Job, you're a sinner. Job, you're a hypocrite. Job, you're a liar. And Job saying, but fellas, I've examined my heart. I don't think I can't find anything in my life that I would cause God to do this to me. Well, finally, now we got this young man. And then look at verses 8 through 11. Now, this young man is going to quote what Job has already said about himself. In verse 8, this young man says, and he's talking to Job, he says, surely thou hast spoken in my hearing. In other words, this young man's been here listening to this conversation between Job and his three friends the whole time. And I have heard the voice of thy word saying. Now, this is what he said, Job, this is what you said, and I heard it. I am clean, without transgression. I am innocent. Neither is there any iniquity in me. Behold, he findeth occasions against me. He counteth me for his enemy. He putteth my feet in the stocks. He marketh all my paths. Now here, Elihu is just quoting what Job has said. Job has said in the past, he says, I can't think of any transgressions that I have done in my mind. He said, and I've heard you say also that God has got like a target painted on you. And you don't understand why God has done all these things to you. Now here, Elihu does get this part of it wrong. Job never said that he was sinless, okay? Job never said, you go back and look in all the chapters prior to this. Job never said that he was sinless, perfect, okay? He knows but what he said was he cannot find anything in him that he did that he thought would cause God to bring this disastrous calamity upon him. That's what he was saying. I mean, Job was a wise man. He knew that he was a sinner. He knew that he had things in his life that weren't right. But what he was saying was, I can't think of anything that I have done that was so bad that God would take away my 10 children, take away all my cattle, all my sheep, all my oxen, and then turn around and strike me down with boils from the top of my head to the bottom of my feet. I can't understand what's going on there. Now, Job said he was not wicked. Look at chapter, hold your place there. You can turn with me if you want, or if you want, just wait there. I'm going to read Job chapter 10. And verse 7. And you can see where Job was saying that he was not a perfect person. In Job chapter 10, verse 7, he said, Thou knowest that I am not wicked, and there is none that can deliver out of my hand. Job said he wasn't wicked. He wasn't a devious, evil, wicked person. Then in chapter 12 and verse 4, he says, I am as one mocked of his neighbor, who calleth upon God, and he answereth him, the just upright man is laughed to scorn. Job said, I am just and upright. Not perfect, but I haven't done anything that I could see that would cause God to do something this bad to me. But then Job said in chapter 23, verses 11 and 12, he says, my foot hath held his steps, his way have I kept, and not declined, neither have I gone back from the commandment of his lips. I have esteemed the work of his mouth more than my necessity food. Job said, I have not disobeyed God. So these are the things that Job has said with his own mouth and his own testimony. But he never said he was sinless. He knows that he has sin. He knows he has problems in his life. His consistency maintained his integrity, but he never said he was perfect. In chapter 9, verses 20 and 21, let me read that to you real quick. Job chapter 9, verses 20 and 21, he says, if I justify myself, now here's Job talking. He said, if I justify myself, my own mouth shall condemn me. If I say I am perfect, it shall also prove me perverse. Though I were perfect, yet I would not know my soul. I would despise my life. Job said, I'm not perfect. He knows that, and he never admitted that. Job was not claiming to be sinless, but he said he was blameless. And there's a difference. Job says, I am blameless in the fact that I cannot find something in my life where God would do all these bad things to me. Then, in verses 10 through 11, let's go back to Job chapter 33, where we're studying today in our lesson. Elihu quoted Job as saying that God was unjust and treating him like an enemy. Look at verse 10. These are things that Job has said in the past, and this young man Elihu is reminding him of them. He said, behold, he findeth occasions against me. He counteth me for his enemy. He putteth my feet in the stocks, and he marketh all of my paths. Job repeatedly was asking God, I'm a marked man. God, why are you doing this to me? I feel like I have a target on me, and people are drawing arrows and shooting arrows at me. And so this young man here is merely quoting back to Job what he has said about himself. Now, the young man did miss the mark when he thought that Job said that he was perfect. Job never said he was perfect. He knew he was not a perfect man. But God speaks to man. And now here in verses 12 through 14, the young man comes to his thesis. You could see he's really thought this thing out. This wasn't just an idle chat sitting over there with Job and his three friends. He's really thought out what he's going to say. He's got it all planned out. And in verses 12 through 14, he gives Job what he believes is the answer to the dilemma that Job has found himself in. Let's look at it in verse 12. Behold, now this is the young man talking to Job about his situation. He says, behold, in this thou art not just. I will answer thee that God is greater than man. Why dost thou strive against him? For he giveth not an account of any of his matters. For God speaketh once, yea, twice, and man perceiveth it not. Here, this young man is telling Job that, Job, I think you've got it all wrong. You're trying to figure out, what did you do that would cause God to give you all these bad things in your life, when the truth of the matter is you just need to step back and realize, hey, you know what? God is just. God knows what he's doing. And God does not have to come down and give an answer for what he does. That's what look back in verse 12 again. Behold, in this thou art not just. I will answer thee that God is greater than man. Job, God knows better than you why you're going through this. And God is very well aware of why you're going through this. And verse 13, he says, why dost thou strive against him? For he giveth not an account of any of his matters. Job, why are you coming to God and saying, please tell me why I'm going through this? As if God has to give you an answer? You see, this young man, he's pinpointing down. He's getting right down to the end of where Job's problem is. Job's problem in his life was he needed to realize that anything that came into his life, that God was approving. And therefore, if God was wanting to show him why, he would. And if God chose not to show him why, who does Job think he is that he has to ask God to give him an account as to why he's going through this? So the young man, he's really zeroing in on the problem here. The young man's telling Job, basically, he said, Job, he says, you're dealing with God. And if God allowed this to come into your life, you just need to accept it. You just need to realize that God's in charge, and God's great, and God is wise, and God knows what's going on in your life and knows everything that's happening. And therefore, instead of, he said, where you have it all wrong, Job, is you're trying to figure out what did you do to cause the problem, rather than saying, okay, God, if this is what you give to me, if this is what you have brought into my life, I know that you are greater than me, and I'm just going to take it, and I'm just going to wait. If you answer me, fine. If you don't answer me, that's fine too. So the young man's got it straight. Now, he says here in verse 14, for God speaketh once, yea, twice, yet man perceiveth it not. What he's saying is, Job, sometimes God speaks to men in different ways and they don't understand. This chapter, verse 14 here, he's really got pinpointed the answer to the problem. He said, Job, sometimes God does things in our life and we don't understand why, but he knows what he's doing. And so now he goes and talks about ways that God deals with men. So this young man is trying to explain to Job that not always do things happen in our lives, that God's going to open and tell us exactly what's happening there. Look at verse 15. In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falleth upon men, in slumberings upon their bed, then he openeth the ears of men and sealeth their instructions. Now sometimes God deals with people in dreams. Now, in the Bible times, God spoke to people in dreams and visions quite often. But today, God speaks to us through His Word. God has given us His Word. He's given us His Holy Bible. God does not necessarily speak to men in dreams and visions today. Oh, sometimes God can shake the confidence of a proud sinner when he has a bad dream and all of a sudden he wakes up and he's all afraid. But God speaks to mankind today through his word. But back in the Bible days, back in the days when Job lived, oftentimes God spoke to men through visions and dreams. So what this young man is telling Job is God deals with people in different ways, sometimes through dreams and sometimes through vision. Now, Job did have a terrifying dream back in chapter 7. He was afraid, but not all dreams come from God. Some dreams come from eating pepperoni pizza too late at night before you go to bed. You eat anchovies, or you eat too much spicy food, and you go to bed and you have some wild, crazy dream or something like that. So not all dreams come from God, but oftentimes in the Bible, God did use that way to speak to men. God can use dreams to shake the confidence of a sinner, but he speaks to us through his word. Then also, God can speak. Now here's where the young man coming down to his whole the main thrust of what he's trying to tell Job is sometimes God speaks to men through pain and suffering. Look at verse 18. He keepeth back his soul from the pit, and his life from perishing by the sword. He is chastened also with pain upon his bed, and the multitude of his bones in strong pain, so that his life abhorreth bread, and his soul dainty meat. In other words, he's got so much pain, he loses his appetite. Sometimes God deals with people like that. Then he says here, in verse 21, his flesh is consumed away, that it cannot be seen, and his bones that were not seen stick out. Yet his soul draweth near unto the grave, and his life to the destroyers. He said, you know what? He says sometimes God uses pain to bring people into a place of submission. Sometimes God brings things upon people to wake them up a little bit. Sometimes, I don't know how many times I've seen this. I've seen people, they go to the hospital and they have something very bad happen to them. And they're laying in a hospital bed. And I'll go by and visit them. And they'll be talking to me. And they'll say, you know what, Brother Jerry? I've been laying in this bed and I've been thinking, you know what? I need to be more faithful to the Lord. And, you know, I need to start going to church more often. And you know, I've been laying in this hospital bed and I'm thinking, I need to read my Bible more, and I need to be more in prayer. Sometimes God has to lay us out flat in a hospital bed to kind of wake us up a little bit, to try to get us to, and then what happens so often is the case, the person gets out of the hospital, God delivers them through their calamity, and they go back and follow the same ways they used to go. They don't show up for church. You hardly ever see them, come into the services. But sometimes God does that. And that's what this young man is telling Job. He said, Job, sometimes God speaks to people through visions and dreams. But sometimes God speaks to men through pain and suffering. And that's what he says. I think that's what you're going through, Job. But by the way, it's a mistake to say, there again, we got to be careful here. It's a mistake to say that every time somebody is suffering, that God has given them that pain and suffering because he's trying to get them to do something that they haven't been doing. If there's two lessons you learn in the book of Job, learn this one thing. Number one is that God brings things into people's lives for a reason. And the second lesson we need to learn from the book of Job is everybody's got their own opinion as to why things are happening to other people, and most of the time we're wrong. Most of the time, we don't have it right. And we need to be very, very careful about how we judge other people that are going through difficulties. But here, this young man is trying to tell Job, Job, it's not you. Quit trying to figure out what did you do? Why did God punish you? Why has God done all these things to you? Job, you need to stop and realize that sometimes God does things just because he's God. And he doesn't have to give an account to anybody for what he does. And when he does that, and you know him, therefore you know that you just have to trust God that he knows exactly why we need to go through this in the end. What about poor Joseph? Back in the book of Genesis, Joseph gets thrown into prison, falsely accused of trying to seduce Potiphar's wife, his boss's wife. His wife sets him up for a controversy. He calls Joseph into her bedroom, and Joseph's there, and she tries to make a big scene out of this thing, and Joseph saw what was going on, and he ran away and left the Bible says he left his coat in there as he was running away, trying to get away from that evil woman. And he ends up in prison, falsely accused. What about, I can think of so many Bible stories about people who have what we call bad things happen to them when they really didn't do anything wrong. But it all was a part of the plan of God in order for God to accomplish his will. So this young man is just trying to tell Job. He said, Job, sometimes people talk, God uses dreams and visions. Sometimes he uses pain. And then sometimes he comes through and he brings a messenger to tell you what's wrong. Let's look back in Job chapter 33 and verse 23, verse 23. If there be a messenger with him, in other words, sometimes God will bring you a messenger and tell you why you're going through your troubles. And if there be a messenger with him, an interpreter, one among 1,000, to show a man his uprightness, then he is gracious unto him, and saith, deliver him from going down in the pit. I have found a ransom. His flesh shall be fresher than a child's. He shall return to the days of his youth. He shall pray to God, and he will be favorable unto him, and he shall see his face with joy, for he will render unto man his righteousness. The young man said, Job, sometimes God will send you a messenger and tell you exactly why you're going through your difficulties. So Job, take cheer. Quit looking at yourself. Quit looking at your life and trying to figure out why all these bad things have happened to you. Sometimes God talks to men through visions and dreams. Sometimes God talks from men through pain. Sometimes he'll actually bring a messenger to you and tell you and explain to you why you're going through what you're going through. Then look at verse 27. He looketh upon men, and if any say, I have sinned and perverted that which was right, and it profiteth me not, he will deliver his soul from going into the pit, and his life shall see light. Lo, all these things worketh God oftentimes with man. He's saying, Job, sometimes things happen in our lives. God is trying to work with you. God is not trying to destroy you. He's trying to... Now, in Job's case, he was making Job... Look, when Job comes through all of this troubles that he's had in the book of Job, he is put on a pedestal and has been given a place in life that no other person has had. And we, as I said, when we started studying this book of Job, you've heard of the term the patience of Job. Job went through all these trials and all this suffering. And why? Because God wanted to show the people that you will love God no matter what happens to you in your life. There are people who trust God enough that even when bad things happen to them, they're going to just continue on and love God and continue on with life. And that's what this young man was trying to tell Job. He says, God does things in different ways, but he is God. God's not trying to destroy you. God's not trying to break you. You know, I remember reading the illustration about this woman was saying how she was watching a silversmith, and he was melting down silver and trying to get the impurities out of it. And so this guy takes some silver and he puts it in a pot, and he's got a fire underneath it. And as that silver starts melting, all of the impurities start floating to the top. And the man took a tool into that molten silver, and he would scrape off the top all of the impurities, and he would throw it away. And the flame was continuing to burn, and the silver was melting, and all of a sudden some more impurities started coming out of the silver, rising to the top. And the silversmith would take that tool and scrape off the top of that molten silver all the junk and all the impurities and get rid of it and scrape the impurities. So the one lady asked the silversmith one time, said, well, how do you know when you've got all of the impurities out of the silver? He said, oh, that's simple. He says, when I look down into the molten silver and I don't see any of the junk sitting on top, and it's not cloudy anymore, and it's perfectly crystal clear, and I could look into it and it looks like a mirror, and if I look into it and I can see my face, then I turn the heat off and I know that the silver's done. Sometimes God does that in our lives. Sometimes God turns the heat up in our lives. Why? We're in trouble. We have some difficulty. We have a financial reversal. We have a health issue, and God brings us into the heat of life, into the difficulties of life. And what happens? When we get into the difficulties of life, we start praying more, don't we? You know, it's a shame, but God knows us. We're human beings. When everything's going well, it doesn't seem like we pray as often as we should to God. But let something difficult come into our lives, and all of a sudden, oh God, we get on our knees and we pray. And what happens? We want God to answer us. We want God to do something in our life. We want God to bring us out of the problem. And it causes the impurities to come out of our life. And as I'm praying on my knees and I'm saying, God, help me, I'm in a difficult situation. And all of a sudden I realize, oh, you know what? I haven't been doing what I should be doing. Oh, Lord, please forgive me. And all of a sudden the impurities start coming out of our lives. And sometimes God puts the heat on our lives to get the impurities out of our life. But he does not do it. And by the way, the silversmith said, if I left the silver on the heat too long, I would destroy it. So I don't want to destroy it. I just want to get the impurities out. And when God brings us through difficulties in life, and he turns the heat up in our lives, so to speak, a lot of times it's to get the impurities out of our life, so that when he looks down at our lives and he can see the reflection of his face, then he knows it's done. I think that's a beautiful illustration about why God does sometimes give people difficulties in their lives. Sometimes God will bring into a tranquil life, all of a sudden, some kind of a difficult situation. And what does it do? Trials in life will do one of two things. It'll either make you bitter, and some people get bitter against God. God, why are you doing this to me? Why are these things happening to me? Or these trials in life will make you better, because you'll say, God, what are you trying to teach me through this? Why am I going through this, God? Please show me. If there's something I need to change in my life, I sure want to do it. I want to get out of this mess. God, please work with me. So when we go through difficulties and we go through trouble. Now, there's three ways we can deal with when God gives us difficulties in our life, just like Job's going through. First of all, we can despise it. We can get mad and say, well, why is God doing this to me? And we can get all upset about it. Or we can faint under it. We can say, oh, this is too much. I can't handle this anymore. I give up. And God does not want to do that to you, no more than that silversmith wants to ruin that silver. He's just trying to get the impurities out of it. Or we could recognize, here's the third way we can deal with it. We could recognize that it comes from God to produce righteousness in our lives. Sometimes God makes the smooth road a little bit rough in order to get us to realize that, hey, we need to straighten out our lives and we need to live more for him. Job's false reasoning is a simple thing. He didn't understand the character of God. He didn't understand that God was dealing with Job. If Job knew how much God was counting on him, if Job knew how much God was pulling for him, remember, God put Job to the test and told Satan, you can do anything you want to him, just don't kill him and he'll still love me. And God's in heaven saying, come on, Job, come on, you can do this. And Job's struggling with all his problems on life. So what Job has to stop, and it has to come from this young man who comes to Job and said, Job, you know what? Sometimes God deals with us and talks to us through pain and suffering and difficulties in life. And Job, you just need to stop and realize it comes from God, and God does not have to give an account to man for what he does. Come back next week and we'll go into Job chapter 34 and we'll see more about what this young man is finally clearing the muddy waters of why Job is going through this difficult situation.